Hey everyone, it's Kothis. In today's video, we are going over everything you need to know about Stasis. And just like my Arc 3.0 guide, this is not going to contain specific builds or anything like that, but rather this is a good foundational video to watch to understand all of those awesome builds that you do see out there. So especially if you're a new or returning player and have no idea what aspects and fragments are and everything that goes along with it, this video will be perfect for you. Also, you will see me using exotics in this video. I'm not going to be covering every exotic that is best for each class because that's just going to take too long. This is just stuff that is related to the subclass of Stasis. My style of content is to start off as broad as possible, so we'll go over everything that relates to every class and then work our way into more specific and granular concepts that are class specific. Also, I will include chapters in the video, so feel free to skip ahead if that's what you want to do. Let's get right into it. Stasis is all about using the frigid power of the darkness to completely crowd control entire rooms. When you master Stasis, almost no enemy will be able to escape it. Stasis gives us a ton of customization with the many aspects and fragments available for us to mess with. If you're new or returning to Destiny and have no clue what aspects and fragments are, by the way, then you are in the right place. We'll be covering what they are and how each of them works. To get started, let's cover the subclass screen really quick so we understand where everything is at. Starting at the top left, you've got your super ability. Each class only has one Stasis super as of the making of this video, by the way, which is unlike some of the other subclasses that give us multiple supers. Next, we've got our class ability. So think Barricade for Titans, Dodge for Hunter, and Rift for Warlock. Moving on, we have our jump choice, melee ability options, and grenades. As a reminder too, all grenades are now available to every class, which in my opinion is a great change. Aspects are in the next section. Think of aspects as our macro level tuning that we can use to adjust our subclass, and we always get to choose 2 aspects at any given time. They add unique abilities for us to work with and are class specific, meaning that Warlock aspects will be different to Titan aspects and so on. The aspects we choose will also dictate how many fragments we can equip at any given time. So some aspect combinations might only let us equip 3 fragments, while others let us use 5. And now we come to the bottom section, which is our fragment section. Fragments are universally available to every class and alter our subclass on more of a micro level, and can also give us stat boosts or penalties. Let's address the elephant in the room really quick. You've got to buy Beyond Light to access Stasis. And that's just the first of many steps. You'll unlock the Stasis subclass once you complete the campaign, and you do have to do this once per character too. And then you'll have to do a series of other quests to fully unlock all the aspects and fragments. Make sure you always have as many quests as possible from the Exostranger in the Beyond area of Europa. When Beyond Light came out, I believe you could only do a couple of these per week. That might have changed now, I'm not sure. Either way, the quests are pretty grindy to be honest, but can be completed somewhat passively as you play normally. Also, if you have Agger's Scepter, it does make most of these pretty easy. If you didn't know, all of the 3.0 subclass overhauls have brought what Bungie calls keywords. Think of these as the general basic functions of the subclass. Stasis gives us 5 keywords to work with. We have slow, freeze, shatter, and these objects called stasis crystals and stasis shards. Let's do a really quick run through of what each of these does, and then we'll move on to more specific synergies within the subclass that we have access to. And just a reminder, this is from a general class viewpoint, so it doesn't matter if you're a Titan, Hunter, or Warlock, all of this information is the same. So slow is first and does exactly what you think it would do. It slows enemies. It basically forms an ice layer around the target, and when enough slow is applied, the target will freeze, which is the next keyword. Freeze is great because it locks targets in place. Just know that the higher tier of enemy you freeze, the shorter their freeze time will be. Lower tier enemies are frozen for about 5 seconds, and bosses you barely notice. Damaging a target enough while they are frozen will cause it to shatter, which is our third keyword. Shatter is usually an instant kill for lower tier enemies, and shattering higher level enemies does a nice chunk of damage. Shatter will also proc an AoE blast, damaging surrounding enemies as well. The next two keywords aren't really actions again, but more so objects we can interact with. Stasis crystals are summoned from the ground in a few different ways and are good for both offensive and defensive purposes. You can shatter a stasis crystal to do damage to nearby enemies, or you can use them to block incoming fire, or both, it's up to you. Lastly, stasis shards are floating objects that we can use to not only regenerate melee energy, but also trigger unique effects and bonuses. So now that we have a basic understanding of the keywords, let's see how we can get these to work and boost their effects even further. So what we're going to cover now is how we initiate the keywords and how we can enhance them through fragments. I will have another section immediately after this section that goes over the fragments that do not synergize with the keywords. They're still really good, but they just don't have any synergy, so I'm not going to include them in this section. It just made the most sense to me when I was writing this guide. I hope that works for you. All right, let's get back into it. A lot of these keywords mix with each other, but I will try to explain all of their triggers and enhancements in a way that makes sense. Let's break down slow first. We know what it means to slow enemies, but how do we get it to work? Well, an easy way is to just toss a dusk field grenade. Any enemy inside it will become slowed. Chill Clip is also an amazing weapon trait that some stasis weapons possess that can essentially accomplish the same slow effect. Those are the main universal ways that we can trigger slow, but it can do more for us than just slow enemies. Whisper of Refraction is a fragment that grants us class ability energy when killing slowed or frozen targets. Whisper of Durance makes slow last longer and also gives us plus 10 strength. Moving on, I'm going to combine freeze, shatter, and stasis crystals into one big category. Well, mostly. Stasis crystals do have unique interactions with stasis shards, but we will go over that after we cover this section, so hang tight. I'm combining these because freezing and shattering pretty much go hand in hand, and there are also a lot of fragments that consider a frozen target the same thing as a stasis crystal. So, with freeze, obviously anything that slows targets will eventually freeze them if we apply enough slow stacks, so we won't cover all of the ways we can slow again. Just know that slowing will eventually lead to freezing. There are two grenades that can instantly proc the freeze effect. We have the Glacier Grenade and the Cold Snap Grenade. When the Glacier Grenade lands, as long as an enemy is in the immediate vicinity, they'll become frozen. Cold Snap Grenades, on the other hand, seek out targets after they land and then freeze the enemy. Stasis Crystals, our other shatterable keyword, are summoned in two general ways. A Glacier Grenade will summon a wall of these upon impact, and the weapon trait Headstone will summon one on precision kills. Lastly, shattering is accomplished in a couple ways. You can do damage to a frozen target or a stasis crystal to cause it to shatter, or bosses will auto-shatter after a split second of being frozen, again doing a pretty nice chunk of damage. Whisper of Hedrons helps increase a ton of stats after freezing an enemy, but does penalize our strength by 10. You'll know Hedrons is active when you see the 10-second stat boost timer on your buff screen. Whisper of Fissures increases the shatter burst radius for defeating a frozen target or destroying a stasis crystal. Whisper of Refraction, again, we went over this, grants class ability energy for defeating slowed or frozen targets. Whisper of Bonds grants super energy for frozen target kills but lowers our discipline and intellect by 10. Whisper of Shards boosts grenade recharge rate after shattering a stasis crystal while giving plus 10 resilience. This is pretty noticeable, and you will see the text improved ability regeneration on the side of your screen. Whisper of Chains gives us boosted damage resistance when standing near a stasis crystal or frozen target and gives plus 10 recovery, and you will also see the resist buff appear. Whisper of Rending will allow kinetic weapons to do boosted damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets, making it super easy to shatter them. So you can see a few of those fragments work on both frozen targets and stasis crystals. That's why I combined them. It just made it easier. Let's wrap up this section with stasis shards. There is technically no universal way to create stasis shards. I know this is supposed to be universal stuff, but each class does have one aspect that allows us to generate them, and they're somewhat similar. Titans get Tectonic Harvest and just need to shatter a stasis crystal, Warlocks get Glacial Harvest and need to freeze enemies to form them, and Hunters get Grim Harvest and need to defeat frozen or slowed targets. Very easy, and you'll be doing this all the time. Just know that you need to have the aspect equipped for the stasis shards to appear. So what do we do with stasis shards? Well, we already know they restore melee energy, but what else? Whisper of Conduction will track them to our position, which is very useful, and if that wasn't good enough, it boosts our resilience and intellect. Whisper of Hunger increases the melee energy gained, but lowers mobility and recovery. Whisper of Rhyme gives 10 seconds of overshield when you collect a stasis shard, and additional shards give more overshield and will refresh the timer. Lastly, I'll mention that the mod Elemental Shards takes stasis shards to an entirely new level. It allows stasis shards to count as stasis elemental wells, which can do all sorts of things, like make you charge with light, give you increased ability regeneration, bonus damage. It's crazy. There is a cooldown here to prevent crazy spam, and stasis shards do not replenish all ability energy like elemental wells, just melee energy. There are 14 stasis fragments, and we have covered 11 already, so only 3 left to go, so this section will be pretty short. Oh, and real quick, remember that fragments are still universal, so it doesn't matter which class you're on. These will all function the same way. Whisper of Fractures recharges our melee quicker when we are next to 2 or more targets, but lowers our discipline. Whisper of Torment increases grenade recharge rate when taking damage, and this is pretty noticeable. You will get your grenade back super quickly. And lastly, Whisper of Impetus reloads stowed weapons and increases weapon handling when using your stasis melee. Okay, I know that was a lot. Let's take a quick breather and go over grenades. As a reminder, all grenades are available on all classes, so it makes it super easy to understand. Yes, there are unique interactions grenades can have with different classes, but let's go over their general utility first. Duskfield grenades form an icy dome around the impact point and will slow and eventually freeze targets that are in it long enough. Glacier grenades create an ice wall that is great again for both offensive and defensive purposes. You can either stand behind them for cover, or shatter them to do AoE damage to nearby enemies. And lastly, Cold Snap grenades will start to seek targets after they land, freezing them on contact. Alright, grenades, pretty easy. Let's move on to the class-specific stuff. Melees, aspects, and super are what are unique to each class. Everything prior to this has been available to every class aside from the quick section where we went over how to generate stasis shards. Okay, Titans, we get the Behemoth subclass, allowing us to completely alter the landscapes of entire areas. Starting off with melee, we've got one, Shiver Strike. It's a nice lunging shoulder charge that covers a pretty good distance and instantly destroys stasis crystals and frozen targets. This is how I personally like to use it instead of using it to try to damage enemies. The shatter damage alone from destroying the stasis crystals and frozen enemies will do great damage to everyone around them. Moving on to aspects, we have 4 to work with. Cryoclasm buffs our slide and the damage it does to stasis crystals and frozen targets and gives 1 fragment slot. Not worth it in my opinion. Tectonic Harvest gives 2 fragment slots and creates a stasis shard every time we shatter a stasis crystal. This is totally amazing, you should run it all the time. Howl of the Storm gives 2 fragment slots and is pretty cool. It's a slide plus melee combo ability that creates a wave of stasis crystals in the direction we slide. Lastly, Diamond Lance is a completely awesome ability that summons an Ice Lance anytime we defeat a frozen target and gives us 3 fragment slots. There is a small cooldown here, but we can pretty much generate these on command. We can throw them and use them to freeze and damage enemies, and we can also use them to slam the ground, creating an AoE burst around us, freezing enemies. As for our super ability, we get 1, Glacial Quake. This super has the potential to create a completely absurd amount of stasis crystals by using the power attack. The light attack, on the other hand, is basically an enhanced version of our melee ability Shiver Strike and is perfect for clearing out those stasis crystals, exploding everything in sight. Stasis Titan is my personal favorite class-subclass combo in the game. It's just a ton of fun. Next up, we've got Revenant Hunters, a very good choice for awesome crowd control. You also get 1 melee ability, Withering Blade. These are stasis shurikens that can slow enemies. These can be thrown quickly and you'll get 2 to use. For aspects, you again will get 4. Touch of Winter enhances each of these stasis grenades, giving each one a unique effect, and gives us 2 fragment slots. Glacier grenades get an added stasis crystal and an altered circular formation. Duskfield grenades get a stasis crystal that forms upon impact right at the center. And Cold Snap grenades create a stasis crystal on detonation, along with an additional chain to seek out another enemy. Grim Harvest is the Hunter's stasis shard generation aspect and gives 3 fragment slots. All you need to do is defeat a slowed or frozen target to create stasis shards. Winter's Shroud will slow nearby enemies by just dodging next to them and gives 1 fragment slot. Shatter Dive is a mid-air ground slam that will instantly shatter any frozen target in a small radius around you, while giving 1 fragment slot. It can also be used to quickly access cover from mid-air. Alright, finishing up with the super. Silence and Squall is the single super that hunters have access to and is an incredible super for ad clearing. You'll first throw Silence to flash freeze and damage enemies, then immediately throw Squall, which is a lingering, moving ice storm that slows and freezes anything caught inside. Seriously, this is a great super for getting total control of a room. Last but not least, Shadebinder Warlocks. Also great for getting a lot of crowd control. Let's start with the melee ability. Penumbral Blast is a stasis staff that sends a stasis projectile toward enemies, freezing them on contact. Not a huge projectile range, but it is a pretty nice ability. As for aspects, Warlocks also get 4 to choose from. Ice Flare Bolts is the first one and basically creates a mini Cold Snap grenade that seeks out additional enemies anytime you shatter a frozen target, and grants 2 fragment slots. Frost Pulse generates a shockwave anytime you cast your Rift, freezing enemies nearby and gives 2 fragment slots. Bleak Watcher is a staple in the Stasis subclass, allowing you to overcharge your grenade and essentially convert it into stasis turrets. And it also grants 2 fragment slots. Also, just know that it doesn't matter which grenade you choose, they'll all convert to the same turret. Finally, you've got Glacial Harvest, the stasis shard generating effect. All you need to do is freeze a target to create stasis shards, it's that simple. And also know that higher tier enemies will give more shards. Alright, let's wrap this up with the Warlock's super ability, Winter's Wrath. Winter's Wrath is another roaming super where you'll first do an area of effect blast to instantly freeze enemies, then cast a shockwave to shatter them. The blast radius here is decent, which is cool, and sticking with the crowd control theme of stasis, this does a pretty good job of doing that. Well, we have come to the end of another video. I really hope this helped you out if you have been confused with how all of these new subclasses work. They are a ton of fun, but finding the perfect mixture of aspects and fragments can be challenging. If this video helped you out at all, please make sure to leave a like as it really does help out the channel, and subscribe too if you want to see more content like this. Solar and Void will be coming out to complete the subclass guide series, by the way. Look out for those coming soon. What else would you all like to see? Let me know down in the comments. That is it for now, everyone. I will see you in the next video.